secondary science educator and an adjunct professor of astronomy at San Francisco State. So I'm going to read a short bio for each speaker, and then they will have some words, and then we'll have a question and answer. Okay? First up, we have Carrie Crouppen. She is the founder of Raw Science. She grew up in Dyer, Indiana. She has a degree in bioengineering from Purdue University and worked for 15 years in medical device development. Carrie won an entrepreneurial pitch competition through Caltech, Ideal Lab, and Art Center College of Design to create Raw Science TV. An advocate at the crossroads of the arts and sciences, the Raw Science Foundation is partnered with Digital Citizen Fund and the Afghan Ministry of Finance to create a STEAM, which is Science, Technology, Engineering, Arts, and Mathematics, high school in Kabul, geared towards providing students with critical technical skills and exposure to emerging technologies and AI. The team plans to create a university modeled after MIT in the U.S. A Mars analog is being created in Afghanistan for students to test their creations. Thank you, Carrie. Jody Marchesso was born and raised in South Dakota. Jody and her husband moved to Pasadena in 2007, where she taught middle and high school science at Blair High School until 2012. Recognized for her work in the classroom, Jody became the K-12 STEM specialist in 2012, leading the Pasadena Unified School District through the transition and implementation of the next generation science standards. She also consults for the National Institute of STEM Education as a coach for teachers and campuses that want to become nationally STEM certified. And Dan Lackus is the vice principal and founding teacher at Ad Astra School on the campus of SpaceX. Originally from Northwest Ohio, he holds a finance degree from Miami University and a master's degree in economics from UC San Diego. Prior to Ad Astra, Dan was a finance and accounting consultant with Protiviti in Cleveland, Ohio, and has been in his current role for the past 4 years with the administration of Ad Astra while teaching math, quantitative reasoning, robotics, and fabrication. So welcome, panel members, and if you would like to start with an opening statement, we'll start here with Carrie.
I would like to describe the project that we're working on with Digital Citizen Fund a little bit. The Afghan Girls Robot Team, some people might have heard of, they traveled last July to the United States for the first time to compete in a FIRST robotics competition. It's a group of around 12 young ladies between 14 and 17 that are from Herat, Afghanistan. These young women have a plan to build the first school for science and engineering in Afghanistan based on the modeling of MIT. MIT Solve and Ada AI are some of their partners. And they feel that the way that their country will transform is by empowering young girls and women and youth to learn science and engineering so that the ever-growing gap in our culture between those who know and don't know, or who have access and don't have access, will close for them. These young ladies also believe that that will change their country from, as they say, a bomb-throwing country to one of high technology. So we are officially partnered with them to help them grow this school, as well as create an amazing robotics design competition inspired by the work they've done with FIRST Robotics and an upcoming TED-like conference in their country. Advisors to the school include Anita Sengupta, who was the manager of the entry, descent, landing for the Mars rovers, as well as Nagin Cox, who's a technical lead on the Mars rovers programs. And then in short, to close that little description, these young ladies, we were often asked, are there differences in education and reasoning and the way young students work in Afghanistan? And there certainly is no cognitive difference, of course, between students there and here, but it's very much like a young Martian crowd because they have similar thought patterns in terms of long-term thinking across decades with the knowledge of high risk.
Thank you. Jody?
So a little bit about the work I'm doing. I was fortunate to join the district office right as the new standards were adopted, and we were going from a system of accountability that focused on math and ELA and very little on science. And so I annoyingly became the voice for STEM education in our district. My colleagues would say it's annoying. I like to say persistent. But trying to make sure that science education started as early as kindergarten and continued up through 12th grade. And so at various levels, I support teachers and administrators in being able to go into a classroom and seeing what should, and being able to identify what students should be engaging in the classroom. That there's hands-on, that kids are asking questions, that kids are going through critical thinking, creativity, problem solving, all those skills they need for a STEM career later in life. And we find through research we often lose girls and minorities between that 8th and 9th grade year. So we're also focusing on providing opportunities to bring their community into their classroom and make those connections. So I fostered a lot of partnerships with Carnegie Observatories, and once a year we go up to Mount Wilson with some high schoolers, and they get to look through the 60-inch and the 100-inch telescope. And they've often said that's an experience that was once in a lifetime, and it kind of had them think about, okay, maybe this is something I want to pursue and look into. We also have connections with Caltech and JPL to bring students and scientists into the classroom together so that students can see what it is they can do with their education. We focus a lot on project-based learning. We feel that that's an important way to get our students engaged. Pasadena Unified, I don't know how familiar you are with it, but we do not represent the community we live in. We have 63 private schools in our district boundaries, and 55% of our students choose to go to those private schools. And so most of our students in our schools are high minority, low socioeconomic status students who often do not leave a 3-block radius of their house. So the teachers and myself and our administrators, we really look at how can we provide opportunities to students they normally would not get. In my role with the National Institute for STEM Education, I also work with campuses and teachers who want to become nationally STEM certified, and we focus on research-based practices that they can use in their classroom to encourage kids in STEM.
Thank you. Dan?
Yep. So I think I'll start with just what my role is at Astor School and then kind of how our school is formed. So I'm the vice principal and founding teacher at the school, so I've been there since the start, and I teach math, I teach quantitative reasoning, and I teach our fabrication class, as well as doing some of the admin work around the school. Our school now has 47 kids. We're pretty small, ages 7 to 14, and we're located on SpaceX's campus. We're entering our 5th year, and I think the core part of our school is based around problem solving and critical thinking, and we've brought that into the classes, every class, but also created 2 dedicated classes, one on qualitative and one on qualitative reasoning, where we bring problem solving to the kids in a way that's meaningful and relevant. So that's the core kind of our school to push those into every single class. We've got the traditional classes, math, science, English, but then these added classes where I think we design these really cool simulations and puzzles for the kids to work through. The last thing is that we always talk about, we redesign the school every year, and every year it starts with creating a school kids love, a place they love to be. We think that that's going to be the environment, a place that they want to be, feel supported, is going to be the place where they learn the most or inspired the most to solve the problems that are coming up in the future.
Okay, thank you. And Dan, luckily I was able to visit the Ad Astor School, which was wonderful earlier this year. And I'd like you to describe a little to the audience the day-to-day workings and how that school is different, because it's very different from any other school I've ever visited.
Yeah, so every year the school changes. What it looked like the first year, we started in a conference room at SpaceX. We had 8 kids, a small conference room, and then a side conference room that we started the school out of. We moved to a second location, and now we're on campus, on the west campus of SpaceX. So the day, I think some things would look really familiar and other things would look completely foreign. We've got kids, 7-year-olds that are managing their own schedule, right? We have a central area where the kids kind of do collaborative work, and then they go off to their English, science, and math classes. And I think those would look similar to a lot of classes that you've probably seen. Where we differ a lot is towards the end of the week we get less structured. Kids get time to explore their passions, We have a big, heavy fabrication portion, and then we've got these quantitative and qualitative reasoning classes that the kids go into and work in teams a lot. I think the projects are really, they're complex, and we add little pieces each week so that it's not the kids getting this whole big complex simulation at once. But like an example of something we would do is we want to get the kids just thinking through seemingly equivalent answers to problems and going into anything that we can find conflict. So the easiest example I found is that if we look at a teacher, a firefighter, police officer, doctor, and a soldier, assign them values 1 to 5 on who should get paid the most to the least. So we would ask, we would ask the kids to do that. And there's not a right answer to it, right? You could rank mayor first, soldier first. But what we want to do is have the kids make those choices and then go through their decision-making process and explain to us how they did it. If a kid says the mayor should get paid or soldier should get paid the most because that's what their parents do, there's another student who says, and that's great, but there's a reason you could say like the soldier should get paid the most because they risk their lives. So we kind of give these kids these questions where we push them towards thinking through the problems and then creating some form of logic to solve an ambiguous problem with seemingly equivalent options. So we do that across subjects, and we do that implicitly in multiple classes.
Okay, awesome. Carrie, can you walk me through a typical day with the Afghani girls and the projects you guys work on? Like, you're there, walk me through the day.
Well, we're just starting our project, so we don't have a typical day yet, but we do a lot of communication remotely because the girls are now back in Afghanistan, although I think they were just traveling in Mexico City and competing in a first round competition this last week again as well. So they're a busy bunch. So right now we're in the planning stages, but as far as I understand, they have fairly typical days in Herat. There's a school right now that ABC recently just covered where on a news program where they have 400 young ladies studying science and engineering in a school, and it's fairly well secured in their area, and that's a typical day of life for them right now. But what we plan to do is help build a Mars analog where they can test their rovers, and the girls actually want to design cars and build them using parts sourced from different areas of the world and test them on the analog. So that will be a typical day.
Are the cars electric? Are they gas powered? What?
They would be electric.
Okay, excellent. And Jody, with the Pasadena Unified School District, what are the challenges with STEM education when you have to stick to such a strict state curriculum?
The struggles are finding the time. We were fortunate about 20 years ago, Dr. Jerry Pine from Caltech wrote a grant, and we got a lot of materials out of that, a lot of training. So we have teachers who have the knowledge they need to teach science, but then in 1997, the state adopted the old California state standards, which kind of killed all creativity in our students. And the nice thing about the Common Core and the Next Generation Science Standards, it's bringing that creativity out. So now it's letting teachers know that you do have the time and space to go deep into the content that students need, that students can engage in long-term projects. And it's just kind of changing the mindset of where we've been, that we have to follow this standardized test because that test is not standardized anymore. And now it's assessing what students really know. So let's get into it, let's have fun. Let's integrate science into our ELA time, so that later in the day they have more time for hands-on. So it's really that time is the biggest constraint, and how do you teach all of this in one day? And so I've been really working with teachers on integrating them and breaking those barriers between different content areas. So they're no longer taught in silos, but we're making connections and realizing that what we're learning in math applies to science, and what we're learning in science applies to history and other content areas.
Cross-curricular, excellent. And Dan, what project do your students, I know you have various grade levels, what project seems to be the one they get the most excited about, something that really stands out?
So we group kids by ability and interest as opposed to age. There's one thing, but I'd say that the classes that they get the most excited about are quantitative reasoning and a qualitative reasoning class. We call them synthesis and GPS. and the reason we know they're interested in it is because their parents are always telling us, they come home and they're talking about these projects, and over lunch, when they're outside, the kids are just talking about how they can solve these different problems. So we try to make these problems super, super relevant to the kids. I do most of the quantitative stuff. Josh, who's the head of school, he runs synthesis, and his projects are just amazing. They're these simulations that are completely built out. An example would be, so the kids are in different groups, and they're trying to make an art installation, and then is kind of the high level. But how that works is there's a set of paintings that there's an auction for, so the kids have to strategize which paintings they're going to go for. They all have the same budget, which paintings they're going to go for, how much they're going to go in for the auction for, to gain their different paintings. Then they have to plan where they're going to go for the paintings. Each painting has a different demand curve in a different city, and so they have to strategize where they're going to go for the different cities, do the calculations for how much money they would get, and then there's a big game theory piece, because if two art installations from two different groups went to the same city, they would split the amount of money that would come. And then there's a lot of iteration through them, and then the complexity is added each week. And then at the end, we have the kids write up a report that we share with experts in the field, or kind of experts. For that one, we had a friend who works at Shed Aquarium, and we used them as an art expert, but I think it works. So she reviewed all of their strategy for how they acquired their paintings, why they chose these different cities. And you see the kids just running around, talking to each other, trying to be like, are you going to go to Shanghai? Are you going to go to Shanghai? And then they're like, I'm not going to tell you, because there's this whole game theory piece of it. And then they end up sharing a little bit, but the personal interactions with each other, with the kids, and then the relationship between the amount of work that they do to, they can, if they come up with a really cohesive strategy of which paintings go well in Shanghai, and then they plan around getting there and taking advantage of that, they can do really, really well. So the kids find this depth of the project where they kind of give them a play space, and then they can make any decision they want. They love those kinds of projects. And it's another one where we know they're talking about it at lunch. They go home, their parents come and talk to us about, the day they come to pick up their kids, they're like, did the kid get that painting by Frida Kahlo? And the parents are talking to us about it as well. So I think those sorts of projects just have so much layered on them. The human the interaction between the kids, within the team, across teams, the game theory, the analysis of figuring out numbers-wise which paintings are the best. And then we layer on top of it these cultural things, right? We use well-known paintings, so that even that piece of the project, they're gaining this bit of knowledge that's going to help them later. So I think those sorts of projects are the ones that the kids get the most excited about.